The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, available online at hallicasserjayne.com. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is supported by the following. Welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. I am Halli Casser-Jayne, soon to be a major motion picture starring Taraji P. Henson and Kevin Costner with a soundtrack by Pharell. Hidden Figures was adopted for film even before the book of the same name was finished by author Margot Lee Shetterly. In her first half hour, Margot Lee Shetterly visits the Halli Casser-Jayne Show to discuss her book and the fascinating, largely unknown true story of the African-American female mathematicians at NASA whose works helped fuel some of America's greatest achievements in space. And in our second half hour, it's four broads talking politics, and you never know what, with our panel of smart, feisty broads, Sheila Willer, Lisa Schifrin, Susanna Andrews, and me, Halli Casser-Jayne. Stay tuned. But before we begin, the Halli Casser-Jayne Show is always available online at hallicasserjayne.com. Soon to be a major motion picture from 20th Century Fox, starring Taraji P. Henson, Octavia Spencer, Kirsten Dunst, and Kevin Costner, with a soundtrack by Pharell. Hidden Figures was adopted for film even before the book of the same name was finished by author Margot Lee Shetterly, and with good reason. Inspiring and a largely unknown true story of the African-American female mathematicians at NASA, whose work helped fuel some of America's greatest achievements in space, Hidden Figures is a story that combines the rich intersection of the Civil Rights era, the space race, the Cold War, and the movement for gender equality. At the core of the story are Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden, the women human computers, whose genius for numbers made space exploration and travel possible. Author Margot Lee Shetterly is the daughter of one of NASA's first black engineers. She grew up in Hampton, Virginia, where she personally knew many of the women in Hidden Figures. Let's talk. So nice to have you here. I have to tell you that this is really a story that should have been told a long time ago as far as I'm concerned. So let me say this to you, Margot. I was so struck by the story you tell in Hidden Figures, but, I'm equally struck by your story and your dad's story, your family story, your childhood in Hampton, Virginia. Just talk a little bit about that for us so we know your background.
Sure. Well, I'm actually sitting here in Hampton, Virginia right now because I kicked off the publication of the book here last night. It was amazing because some of the women and their families and so many people from my community came out. I grew up kind of in the shadow of the NASA Langley Research Center. My dad is retired research scientist there, worked his entire career there. I also kind of grew up in the shadow of Hampton, what was then called Hampton Institute, it's now called Hampton University, which is a historically black college. My mom went to school there, and then she taught there. So there were this confluence of forces that gave me, I think, a very unique childhood. I knew some of these women both because they were my father's colleagues over at NASA, and also because they were part of that network of black colleges and sororities and social institutions that really kind of gave shape to kind of social mobility for African Americans over the course of the 20th century. I knew them growing up. I kind of had this wonderful thing where I got to see African Americans as scientists and also women of all backgrounds. I saw a lot of women working over there at NASA, and so it never occurred to me that a woman couldn't be or wouldn't be a mathematician.
So many things, as you said, so many confluences, they all come together in the story, and that's another reason that I like it. I want to give the full title, Hidden Figures, The American Dream and the Untold Story of the Black Women Mathematicians Who Helped Win the Space Race. It's hard to believe that this has not been written before. Tell me why now for you? What decided you to go forth with this story at this point?
Well, when I was really, at the very beginning of this process, it was really a comment from my husband, who's not from here, who, we were home and we were visiting my parents, and my dad was talking a little bit in this one particular instance about some of these women that he'd worked with, and he mentioned Katherine Johnson and, sort of very casually how she had calculated the launch windows for the early Mercury flights. And my husband's like, wait a minute, how can I not know this story? The same question you're asking. how come we don't know this? And, I think we kind of took it for granted to a certain extent. It's certainly true that sometimes you need history, a little space in order to, understand the true import of things. And I think that's the case right now. This idea of who can be a scientist, how do we get more women into our STEM workforce? How do we include more African Americans, and different people into the STEM workforce? All of these are things that we're talking about today. And I think that when you look at an entire category of people, a group of Black women and those women inside a much larger group of white women and women from other backgrounds who became mathematicians, I think you say, well, maybe we can learn from this and answer some questions about how to answer, how to deal with these issues today. And then I think it's also, we need to get these stories, and I certainly felt this, we need to get these stories before it's too late. Mrs. Johnson turned 98 years old on Friday, Friday, August 26th, 2 weeks ago. And we have to capture the stories of these people while they can still tell them to us in person.
I so agree with that. But, the thought crossed my mind that if this had not been a story about Black women, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference, right? Because we always seem not to get our stories told as well as maybe some others, of different communities do. That this might have been told before. So I was really thrilled to see that you picked this up and you pushed it forward and to see what's happened with it. Let's go back to November 1943 with Dorothy Vaughan, one of the people that you mentioned, a teacher at the Negro College, now a high school in Farmville, Virginia. Now I'm going to use the term Negro. That's what you used in the book. And I guess because of the times, we're going to go back and forth between different terms as we speak. So nobody be offended. We're talking times. We'll introduce the others in a focus in the book in a minute. But Vaughan, she was one of the first Black women to be hired by what was then called, and I want to do a little background here, an experiment quietly underway at the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia. Give us a little background on the experiment first, and maybe some background so that those who don't know the difference between NACA, that would become NASA.
Right. So we all think about NASA as being the space agency and, sending humans into space and trying to land a man on the moon. Before there was space, there was aeronautics. Right here in Hampton, Virginia, the federal government decided to start what was then the nation's center of aeronautical research, airplanes. How do we get airplanes to be safer? How do we go from propellers to jet engines? How do we make the wings more efficient so they sail through the air, faster? All of that was happening here in Hampton, Virginia, and people from all over the country, engineers who had graduated from MIT, all of the top engineering schools around the country, people from the Northeast, people from the Midwest, people from all over the South, they all made their way to this little sleepy town called Hampton, Virginia, and they set about to make airplanes faster and safer. It's a lot of math. They do testing in wind tunnels. They fly planes with instruments on them, collect a lot of numbers and measurements, and somebody's got to analyze those numbers. And in 1935, they set up the first computing pool. 5 women, white women in this case, and with the idea that, we're going to take the computing away from the men. It's tedious, it's boring, but it needs to be done. It needs to be done right. We're going to see if women can do it. Well, the women were very good at that job, and by the time World War II came around, there were hundreds of women doing this job at Langley. And then, what happened is, often during times of war, we saw that the doors opened for women. They opened for Black women as well because a civil rights leader named A. Philip Randolph pressured then President Roosevelt to open the civil service that had been segregated to African Americans. And so about 2 years after an executive order banning discrimination in the civil service and the defense industry, 5 African American women walked through the door into something called the West Area Computing Office and started working as professional mathematicians.
And Dorothy?
Dorothy was, she came in December, so she was in that first year, not that first 5, but in the first year. And she had been a teacher. So many of these women had been teachers. That's what you did. If you were good at math and you were a woman with a math degree, you went to the classroom and you taught math. Dorothy had been doing that, and she'd actually been doing it at a place called Robert Moton High School in Farmville, Virginia, which would become very well known in the 1950s as one of the schools that filed a lawsuit that would become Brown versus Board of Education, which overturned segregation in public schooling in the United States. So when I saw that connection, that she had worked at that school as a teacher, I just couldn't believe it. It just felt like how, this amazing woman, her personal story had so many different connections to the big moments of the 20th century. So Dorothy eventually, she went to work in this group of black women. Originally, the managers of that group were two white women, but Dorothy eventually rose to be the head of that group. She was the first African-American supervisor in the federal agency that would become NASA. And, that fact, I sort of stumbled upon it, put it together almost as, just sort of happenstance, of just putting these pieces together and, discovering that and that no one had ever looked at her life and her career and her accomplishments. It was sort of stunning to me. And yet there it was, there were the facts of her career. And, I was getting this amazing opportunity to bring that to light.
It's fascinating. She's fascinating. But before we go further, there's something that I do want to bring up. We mentioned it briefly, but I think we should punctuate it, and that is, think World War II. Federal war jobs and the black community, that's one aspect. Women, up until World War II, or maybe World War I for a brief moment, but mostly World War II, women were introduced to the workforce. It really was the changing time when things would open up for people like you and me as we go forward in our lives. So I want to make that point, and as you made it for black women, certainly, but those two issues of equality, gender equality, and color equality, I think, are one of the things that changed at the time of World War II. And I think that
is so true.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we look at the 60s as a great time of change, and certainly they were. The civil rights movement, the fight for gender equality, the space race, absolutely all of those things had their roots in World War II. World War II was a transformative time for American society, a great opening. It opened jobs to African Americans. It opened so many jobs to women. It said that a woman could be a welder, a mathematician. There were a few women who were pilots. There was the Women's Army Corps. Women were serving in the military. So, World War II was just a hugely important precursor to many of the liberties and the freedoms that we enjoy today. And, I think that very often we don't look back far enough to that time period and those people who were working then to understand how we live today and to draw that very direct connection to how they were living back then.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating, to say the least. So here's something that I love that you wrote in the book. I have to tell you, Margot, this was in the prologue when you were speaking about the woman. You said, and I'm going to quote you, that so many were African American, many of them my grandmother's age, struck me as simply a part of the natural order of things growing up in Hampton. The face of science was brown like me. I so love that. I'd like you to speak to that. Role models in particular, not so much. It's so hard, in the African American community. And here they were, right in your own backyard. Not everybody was as fortunate you are. But I love that. Talk to me a little bit about that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, my diverse or inclusive image of science started right in my house. My dad he's now retired, but he worked his entire career at NASA Langley Research Center as a research scientist doing atmospheric physics. And a lot of the people that I grew up around worked there. They were engineers, they were scientists, they were mathematicians, people with, a variety of technical backgrounds. And many of them were African American and African American women. My dad worked with Mary Jackson and also women of all backgrounds. I had no idea or no sort of preconceived limit that simply for being a black woman, I was not supposed to be either, a scientist or a mathematician. In fact, I felt pressure in a way, to pursue that career. So
I think this is one of the most extraordinary things about this book that you wrote and the story that you tell, because I think this concept of role model or growing up in an environment where something is natural, that you don't even think twice about it, therefore you have set no limitations on yourself, is so huge. So huge. I wish this were in every community, inner city, wherever, where this became a natural thing. Think about that. Think about the extraordinary, how lucky you were.
I every day I look at it and I'm like, I think of myself to be even luckier. I mean, because one of the strengths of this story and the strengths of how I grew up, this isn't a story of firsts or onlys. You know, it wasn't like there was just one woman and, you know, she kind of bore the brunt of success or failure and have everyone say, well, you know, you failed. You black women can't do science, you know. Women are bad at math. None of those things, you know. There were enough people that, you know, I got to see that it wasn't an exception, that it wasn't unattainable, that it wasn't impossible, or that it had in some way had to hijack normal life, that you didn't have to go be cloistered away in some strange place and not interact with normal people because you were, you know, a mathematician or something. You know, for me, it was an extraordinary thing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think that maybe the power of having the story told and having it shown in film, you know, and as much as I am so hopeful that everybody listening will go out there and read the details of these stories because they're just amazing. I do know that the visual power of film and its reach is just a platform that is just, you know, just so big, and that for people to see, you know, embodied on the screen, these roles of these women, you know, I think it's the kind of thing that really does change all of our minds about who can be a scientist. And the next time we see a black woman, then maybe we'll think, you know what, she must be a scientist.
Right. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I hope so.
Yeah. Let's talk about Katherine Johnson for a moment. Her story, you say, doesn't quite match the myths surrounding her, but Katherine, Apollo 13, extraordinary. President Obama presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Talk to me.
Yeah, you know, I think the thing is she is so exceptional. I mean, she really is a gifted person, not just mathematically, but it is the force of her character. You know, I think that allowed her to do the things that she did. You know, but I think that what I really, you know, think is true is that, you know, we don't ask. A lot of times we are so hungry for those role models, and we are so hungry for those people like her to provide us with just, you know, so much evidence against, you know, negative stereotypes, and, you know, prove to all of us through that one person that we are capable, whether that we as African American or women or whoever, that we kind of want them to be even more than their already exceptional achievements. She is exceptional by any standard, you know, and we don't ask Chris Kraft or Gene Kranz or any of these other guys, you know, who were also very talented people in the space race to have done everything and to stand in for everyone, you know, and I think it's because we have had so few of those role models that we want them to you know, to be superhuman and attribute everything to single-handedly have saved, you know, the Apollo 13 or things like that, when what they did is even better than that. You know, it's even better because it was real, because they did it, because it's provable, because we have the documents. You know, that's the thing, you know, and I think that's why for me, this project was so exciting to, like, turn up, oh my goodness, there's another woman. Her name is Dorothy Hoover. In 1952, she's a black woman doing extremely high-level theoretical aeronautical research. Wow, you know, there is a woman, she was a white woman named Doris Cohen, 1941, had come from New York down to the center. She published like 10 research reports. You know, the thing about this story is it gives us the facts and it gives us the real people, so that we're not going to have to need anything more than that. Going back for a second to Katherine, she when Apollo 13 had the big blow up inside the spacecraft, she was the one who was doing all the math, right, from the ground. I just want to tell that real quickly. So what happened is she and the engineer that she worked with for a long time, they were saying, you know, what is it that happens when the computers go out? You know, like this, you know, computers were new, and nobody knew that better than Katherine Johnson, because she had double-checked the calculations of the computer for John Glenn's flight in 1962. So the idea that, you know, there might be a situation in which astronauts could be sort of cut off from those computers, or those onboard computers went out, what do we do then? So she and her one of her colleagues worked up a plan whereby astronauts could navigate by the stars in order to sort of align themselves and get back home to Earth. And so they put together that backup plan. At the end of the day, there was another, sort of a backup plan, because there were so many particles after this onboard explosion of Apollo 11, sort of glinting pieces of space garbage that had blown out of the ship, that made it very hard to distinguish the stars in the distance from these little particles all around them. They actually had to use another plan, like a sort of more simple method of navigating using the sort of line of the sun's shining on the Earth to get back home. But she and this engineer's name was Al Hamer, they had worked up that backup plan of navigating by the stars exactly for that occasion.
You think about this, it is extraordinary. Oh my gosh. A few words about Mary Jackson. I would like to get a few words about her and a little bit about Christine Darden to tease the audience so they want to read about these women. So give me a few on Mary Jackson.
Yep. Well, Mary Jackson, she actually became the first African-American aeronautical engineer at NASA in 1958. Just think about that, way back in 1958. And she very well may have been the only black woman doing that job, aeronautical engineering, in the whole country at that time. In order to get that promotion to that job, she had to get special permission to attend the after-work classes at the segregated Hampton High School, the city school at the time, just to walk through the door to take the classes so she could, move up in her career. But Mary, at the end of her career, just after, 25 years as an engineer, what she decided to do was to go into human resources, take a promotion, which she did, because what she really wanted was to help women of all backgrounds, all colors, move up at the agency. So her, just a true humanitarian, a great, great woman, and, a fierce advocate for other women.
And Mary and Christine Darden?
Well, and Christine Darden, she's the baby of the group. I think tomorrow's her birthday. I think she turns 74 years old. She is as busy a person as anyone can be in retirement. I just saw her last night, and Christine Darden really did stand on the shoulders of all of those women who came before her and went to the top of the profession. She, after, she went into the computing pool, she fought to become an engineer, to leave the pool and to become an engineer where she could do her own research. And she became one of the world's top experts on supersonic flight and sonic boom. And one of the top women of any color and top African Americans, men or women, over the course of her career at NASA. So just a truly inspirational, very, very smart woman, and very much like these other women, very humble and, very modest about the incredible things that she's accomplished over her life.
So much to talk about, so little time. Dorothy Vaughan told historian Beverly Golemba, is that how we pronounce it? Yeah, I want to say it right, in 1992. What I changed, I could. What I couldn't, I endured. What a phenomenal thought statement, right?
Phenomenal, and, for me, it's a little bittersweet because Dorothy really was phenomenal. Katherine Johnson calls her the smartest person she ever knew, and if Katherine Johnson's saying that, you really have to pay attention. So Dorothy Vaughan, she was ahead of her time. If she had come along 10 years later, maybe she would have been running, an integrated group with men and women, which is what, I think that she kind of thought might have come out of the end of her career. And, after segregation ended and they disbanded the segregated group of West Computers, she went back to being one of the girls. All the women were called girls at that time, and she became, one of the girls again. She lost her management position and was never able to get another one. But she really opened so many doors. She was a fierce advocate for the women at the center. And, I think she was ahead of her time. But, we are experiencing her legacy now and seeing the results of it in all of the great women who came after her.
It's interesting because you said use the word bitter, and I was going to talk to you about that because she said they paid me what they asked her to be involved in a class action lawsuit over paid discrimination, and she said they paid me what they said that they were going to pay me, and that struck me as her great voice saying, look, no bitter. Let's not do that. That's not what this is about. And I think that that's one heck of a lady. I'd sure like to talk to her. The film comes out when?
The film is it's slated for official release on January 13th, but I think the screenings will start in December.
And you worked as a producer. They were so enthralled with your work on this thing that they made you a producer. How fun was that?
I spent, most of my effort was really sort of consulting to the historical story and, giving them all the background information on these women and this place. And, we went on a tour of NASA. That was really fun, taking all the producers on this tour of NASA. And I got to go to the set, and that was really something else to see this big world that they had reconstructed that came out of this book and this research.
I think this was like magic for you. I think you were supposed to do this, and this was a gift from the gods for you for sure. Have you seen a rough cut?
I haven't yet. I've seen clips, and they're still working. This is all happening so quickly. The book is out, but was put to bed not that long ago, and this movie is moving on a similarly super accelerated track. So they are, they wrapped filming, and they are still working on it to meet that sort of December timeline. So I think soon.
Soon. So here's something that I do want to ask you, because this is, as I said it, I started this out with your story as much as their story. So Margot, after all of this whole experience, from your husband saying what he said to your going into the research for this thing being sold as a film before you even really finished the book, talk to me about the great lesson in all of this for you.
I think that honestly for me, the great lesson is you really have to stay open to life. I look at these women, and the way they started their lives and the expectations they had at the beginning and where they ended up at the end. I'm sure they always felt they'd do their best, whatever life gave them, but really life just took them in places they could never imagine in the beginning. Dorothy Vaughan and Katherine Johnson, spending most of or a good chunk of the beginning of their careers as teachers and then ending up at NASA. Mary Jackson worked for a stretch as a military secretary before she became a computer over there. And so for me, it's been kind of similar. I've done a lot of stuff. I started my career as an investment banker, and then did some time at software startup companies. My husband and I moved to Mexico, and we started an English language magazine for expats living down there. Did that for a while, and then I started working on this book. So I would just, for me, both through my personal experience and writing about these women, I think staying open to life, always doing your best, just your parents tell you to do and your teachers tell you, but staying open to the serendipity, you kind of have to do that. And for me, that has been absolutely the case with this book. Everything that I've done before, has sort of benefited me in bringing this project to fruition. And I'm just, I couldn't be happier. I feel like I'm doing the work that I'm meant to do right now.
Life is magic, kiddo, right?
It really can be, and these women, they ended up doing the work that they were absolutely unequivocally born to do.
I've been speaking with Margot Lee Shetterly, author of Hidden Figures, The American Dream and the Untold Story of the Black Women and Mathematicians Who Helped with the Space Race, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers. For more information about Hidden Figures and author Margot Lee Shetterly, visit her website at hiddenfigures.com. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. My guest today, the author of Hidden Figures, Margot Lee Shetterly, and Sheila Weller, Susanna Andres, Lisa Schifrin, and me, our panel of four broads talking. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. And we are back on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Thank you for being here. Okay, folks. Yep, they are back. Here's this week's edition of Four Broads Talking. Oh, and in case you don't remember from our last visit, our ladies, or broads, we go both ways, are Sheila Weller, Lisa Schifrin, Suzanne Andrews, and me, Halli Casser-Jayne. I'll be joining in as well as moderating. Okay, here we go. We are Four Broads Talking.
And here we are. We took a couple of weeks off, but we're back. Four Broads Talking, right in Time for the last 8 weeks of this wacky election cycle. We're so happy to be here and to share our points of view with all of you. Let me introduce everybody. First, Vanity Fair writer Susanna Andrews. Say hi, Susanna, so they know your voice.
Hi, all. It's so great to be back again.
And also joining us, another brilliant writer who didn't love that great book of hers. Actually, many, many great books, but my favorite, Girls Like Us, Miss Sheila Weller. Say hello, Miss Sheila Weller.
Hello, everybody. Great to be back.
And our political pundit writer, yes, our resident conservative, Miss Lisa Schifrin. Say hello, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
And, of course, I am your host, Halli Casser-Jayne. We all have just a few opinions, myself included. Let's get going. This was quite a week in politics, needless to say. Let's start with Miss Hillary having passed out, sort of, not quite, but almost, at the 9/11 ceremony. And then we find out that 2 days before she'd been diagnosed with pneumonia. Years ago, that would have been like, oh, my gosh, no more. But I'm not sure the Republicans didn't have a field day with making it more than it probably really is. Not the issue. The issue is, did she make a mistake? Did her team make a mistake in not telling the truth or not coming forth, not telling the truth? And I'm glad I used that word because before we get started, that word lie and truth has been thrown around a lot. It's not appropriate. Nobody lied about this. They simply didn't come forth with what she had. And before we go down the track with that, I want to talk about whether she should have and what everybody thinks they think she should have told it, not told it. Is it private information? Isn't it? Sheila, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. In, hindsight is 20/20. She should have told it. But had she told it, all kinds of conspiracy theories would come out. It's not pneumonia. It's a brain tumor. She got the pneumonia 5 weeks ago, and she lied then. I mean, she's almost in a lose-lose with anything about her health. If you go on the Drudge Report, and that's my go-to thing every morning. I've done it for years. Everything is Hillary health conspiracies. 10 items on the top of the Drudge Report a day. So what is she going to do? Yes, in retrospect, she shouldn't have not disclosed. I guess they thought they could kind of get away with it. But I think they thought if she disclosed, it would be more headaches. It would be more questions, conspiracy theories. Does she have a brain tumor? Is she going to die? All that stuff. She was between a rock and a hard place.
Well, I agree with that. Let me throw this in before I ask Lisa this question. Lisa, as a woman, we get sick. We're not allowed to get sick. We power through. You're a mom. You can't afford to stay in bed if your kid needs you. So you don't do that. When you go to work, you don't do that. Did she feel, particularly since, for reasons that we don't understand, Mr. Trump has been hammering her on her health and, whether or not she's a viable candidate, whether she's strong enough. But what about this issue of women and women always feeling like we better not tell anybody we're sick and powering through, I think is the word that she used, that she said, I just felt like I was going to power through. It was no big deal. What do you think, Lisa Schifrin?
Well, I want to say three things.
Make it two.
Well, no. A second ago, Sheila said that she was in a lose-lose situation about her health with regards to telling the truth or not telling the truth. And I don't think that's the issue at all. I think she was in a difficult situation about her honesty. And I not only do I think that, but David Axelrod had a fascinating tweet this morning where he pointed out that this is a problem of Hillary's own making because of her penchant for secrecy and because of the fact that they don't tell the truth all that often and they keep reporters at a distance. So the powering through thing, you know what? I have sometimes gotten sick and gone to bed because when it's really bad, it's really bad. So I think that the way to be equal is to do what you need to do. Do men power through? Occasionally when they have to, but mostly not. They're kind of, you've all seen men kind of huddle in a fetal position because they have a cold. And she's obviously not doing that. And this is a very hard thing, running for president. But pneumonia is a very serious thing in a woman her age. She is not young, and that is a real issue. And she's also, you can't be... The reason that what she did was the wrong thing, again, in retrospect, but very, very clearly, is that it brings up all of her main issues, trustworthiness, what's she hiding? Is she hiding something? But also there she was at the most symbolic place in our country right this minute, the World Trade Center.
Okay, and I'm going to stop you there. And I'm going to stop you there. First of all, she didn't faint. Let's be accurate, Lisa. She did not faint. That's number one. But number two, she felt that she wanted to go there because that was so much a part of her being the senator from the state of New York, and she was going to be there for the people.
Okay,
Let me just say, wait. Is it possible that we could think the better part of her, or from the Republicans, is it always the worst? Susanna Andrews, you got anything to say about this?
I did see the tape over and over and played it in slow motion, and the optics were horrible. I have to agree with Lisa on that. I feel that it does go to what David Axelrod said. What is he? Pneumonia, the cure is simple, it's antibiotics, but what is the cure for a penchant for secrecy that creates problems? I keep going back to her advisors. This is, yes, she should have disclosed this. Yes, I understand she felt that she needed to go on. She was going to power through. It wasn't a big deal. However, she needs to have considered the context, too. This is a climate of irresponsible media reporting, fear-mongering, lying. In that context, you opt for transparency. You don't even risk giving people something to use against you. Like, you have a fever. You're going to sort of stumble. I mean, you could see her feet lifting off the ground. Those people had to pick her up and put her in the van. Now, having said that, more power to her. She works 24/7, and the whole campaign was sick, and she got pneumonia. In this day and age, it's like, okay, asked and answered, antibiotics next. But, yeah, she didn't do that.
I want to say something that Lisa said also. Lisa, I think it's ageism. First of all, I don't think being in your late 60s is old. I mean, but hey,
Donald Trump is 2 years old.
Well, not only that, I come from a line of people into their 90s, so I just don't feel that that's old. But I think it's ageism to start playing that card. And I
don't even remotely think that. I think you're picking a president who has to be a strong leader, and I think that it is very odd that we've got these two candidates in their late 60s. Actuarial tables will tell you that they are prone to a lot more mishap and illness than any normal person who
who both have proved have great stamina and great mind. And so I find this whole thing crazy. But, I want to talk about the press and all of this. And I'm going to turn to you, Susanna Andrews, about this, because I think that the press has failed on this miserably. And I think that they fueled this. They fed this. Matt Lauer played into a certain kind of anti-feminism in that disgusting, what was that thing called? I mean, it wasn't a, what's the word?
The town hall.
Oh, the commander-in-chief town hall or something? Where he wanted to come off as commander-in-chief?
Yeah, I mean, that was just utterly bizarre. But I think that the press is falling prey to this thing and is playing it. I mean, they're going to accept that Trump is going to go to Dr. Oz, go to television to discuss his physical health, and not. If it were me on CNN right now and I was running the show, I'd be screaming like a lunatic. Are you kidding me, Dr. Oz? This is so ridiculous. I mean, talk to me.
There's no question in my mind that they are easier on Trump, and I think that the press could be influencing the outcome of this election as a result. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot. I have a couple of theories. One is that I think the media thinks that Hillary Rodham Clinton is going to be the next president, so they need to be tougher on her. But in the process, they're sort of changing, the outcome. They're increasing the chances that Donald Trump wins. I also think another factor is that they don't know how to deal with him. How do you deal with someone who refuses to be bound by facts, who cannot be shamed, who is essentially laughing at the entire process and them as well? I don't think, I was reading back to the point you made about how the press handled the pneumonia thing. Yahoo News, don't laugh. It's the great aggregator, though, and it reaches a huge number of people. They reported on Hillary nearly collapsing in great detail. Bubba never once mentioned the pneumonia.
Right. And
whole story.
Yeah.
And it was by that time well known.
Right.
So people are being influenced. Voters are being wrongly influenced, I think.
Sheila, you're a great writer. You write all the time about all of this.
Nice of you.
She is. She's a great writer.
She is.
So is Susanna.
Everybody here are great writers. But but Sheila.
Okay.
So you deal with this all the time. You've been around.
I do?
Yeah, well, you do. You've been around the block. You know everything that's going on. You've got good eyes and what have you. I mean, from your perspective, you've been around long enough. Not as long as Trump, but Yeah,
but to know what? What's your question?
I want to know what you're thinking about in terms of the changes in the press and the media and how all of this is being
Well, I hate blaming the media, and the media has been blamed for everything from Princess Diana's death to this, to that, to this, to that. But this time with Trump, it's true. Starting with Les Moonves months ago saying he's great for ratings. And now, everybody's just kind of catching up and shaming themselves and looking at him more realistically. But he's very hard to deal with. And Matt Lauer, who did a horrible job, kind of proved it. He doesn't give a damn about telling the truth. And there's no ability to fact check him. Even if you do, it's too late. His voters do not care. They do not care. That's the first thing. But the second thing is you can't check him instantaneously, and he eludes, he evades, he plays games, he does his TV shtick. He gets someone like Matt Lauer to fall into his web, even if Matt Lauer doesn't think he's doing it, an extremely experienced TV journalist. I don't care if you say he's morning TV or not. He's done very good, tough interviews. And that was embarrassing. So how do you deal with Trump?
I don't know.
How
Lisa,
are these moderators?
Let me ask Lisa Schiff. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead. Go ahead, Susanna.
I think in the whole scheme of things, Megyn Kelly is the best at handling him.
She did. She
did, and then she folded. Yeah.
Now we also have to remember that this is a largely television media cycle we're talking about with Trump. He doesn't submit himself to that much newspaper and magazine reporting, to print or to radio. So it's all the weaknesses of television journalism that are coming into play. I think that's part of it. But Megyn Kelly was really good. Now, what was her secret sauce?
You know what? I'm just sitting here trying not to laugh. You people are upset because once on TV she got grilled hard by a Twinkie who started his career as a clothes model. He pushed a little hard on an issue where she really ought to be accountable to the American people. No Republican escapes this time after time after time. And Trump, you know what? At this point, I will defend Trump wholeheartedly. But the truth is, he's a creation of the media. They put him in place. They can't deal with him. Okay, you got what you paid for.
I think you're right about that, Lisa, by the way. You are 100% right about that. But let me ask you a question. Is there anything that Trump does that you find, listen to the word, deplorable? Who laughed?
Me or Lisa? Who you asked?
I said Lisa Schifrin. I'm
just not even going to touch that word because, like everyone else I know, I feel like he was saying that to me. I'm a racist, a sexist, a xenophobe, an Islamophobe. You know what word? Wait, here's a little point I just want to add because it's not something everybody's talking about. The one she didn't bring up was anti-Semites. And that is because that's her team. I was just shocked that she left anti-Semites off her basket of deplorables.
Well, I don't know. Being one who who's pretty sensitive to anti-Semitism, I have to say that I think that if you bring up David Duke, you're also bringing up anti-Semitism. I don't know that there's any difference between his form of racism and his anti-Semitism. But I want to go back to something also on this, and that you said 50%. So every Republican who heard that, 50%, and she backed off from the 50% comment on the deplorable. Every single one of you then took it personally as if you're feeling guilty? What?
No guilt. Two things. One, we all knew this was yet another nasty attack lobbed at conservatives and Republicans, and because every Republican, including me, has been called all of those things many times. It's a joke. The word racist, which used to be the worst thing you could call somebody, has now lost almost all of its power because it's used so promiscuously.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
There is the classic, I wear your scorn as a badge of honor. There's a Facebook page started by a friend of mine on Saturday morning that within 2 days had 5,000 members. And it'll have 15,000 by tomorrow.
I think this is so refreshing. I mean, here we are. It was so not PC of her, but now all the PC haters have just gone PC on us. Oh, my God, you're calling me a racist. Oh, my God, misogynist is such a mean word.
We are laughing about this. And
no, I don't think anybody, no, nobody's laughing. Oh, no. Everybody are just totally freaked out about it. But let me take this.
I don't think the right is freaked out. I think this is her being Trump. She just did the thing that we are so grateful our candidate has
too big a word for Trump. He
wouldn't even know what the word meant. But I want to get back to what you just said about that because, I mean, it's being Trump. Okay, if you don't like it in Hillary, why is it acceptable in Trump, Lisa? This is the thing. This thing has gone to the lowest common denominator, and it was not let me finish. And it was not done by Hillary. It was done by him. And he put her in a position of, if she's going to have any chance of surviving this and maybe getting to the presidency, she's going to have to play his game to some degree.
He has to be nasty to her. Now, she was talking at a private fundraiser to an LGBT.
She knew that the cameras were there. And the audio was there. So don't even go down that route. That's ridiculous.
Her audience of gay people able to give large amounts of money. So you got
she wasn't, because listen to me. That is ridiculous. That is whoa. I'm speaking. Let me speak. That is ridiculous. I will let you say whatever you want to say as long as it's within a cognitive argument. But that is not one. She knew exactly what it was being recorded. She knew, and it was I personally think, and maybe you girls, Suzanne and Sheila, back me up on this. I actually think that she did it specifically, purposefully, knew she was going to do it, knew exactly how she was going to do it. Her biggest mistake was that the media did not pick up the second part of the conversation,
right.
And that wasn't her problem. And let me.
Because, that's
Halli, what was it?
Lisa, before I go on, the second part was. But the other basket, and I know this because I see friends from all over America here. I see friends from Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and Texas, as well as, New York and California. But that other basket of people are people who feel the government has let them down. The economy has let them down. Nobody cares about them. Nobody worries about what happens to their lives and their futures. And they're just desperate for change. It doesn't really even matter where it comes from. They don't buy everything he says, but he seems to hold out some hope that their lives will be different. They won't wake up and see their jobs disappear, lose a kid to heroin, feel like they're in a dead end. These are people we have to understand and empathize with as well. That's pretty powerful.
That is powerful.
Beyond.
No,
I mean, it's ugly. And you know what?
Why is that ugly? Why? Reality is ugly?
Hang on a second.
We are hanging on.
The truth is that if you call a bunch of people a basket of deplorables and then name all these insults that your side uses commonly against the other side, whatever you say next will be lost. Any speechwriter knows that.
First of all, you're misinterpreting the first part of it. She said, in the basket were the deplorables, meaning those who are attracted to him for racist reasons, xenophobic reasons, misogynist reasons. It is deplorable to be a racist. It is deplorable to be a misogynist.
Well, one at a time.
It is deplorable to call all Mexicans rapists and women pigs and dogs. Are you saying it's not deplorable, Lisa?
You know what? I'm not going to answer that question. It's not something I like, and it's not something that did a lot of good for him.
So let me take control of this conversation, because the same reason that you're not answering that question, Lisa, let me take the same reason that you were not answering that question is the same reason that Mike Pence denounced the KKK, but he will not call them deplorable. And it's because he doesn't let me finish. He didn't do it not because he doesn't think he's deplorable, because he does think he's deplorable, but to have a soundbite that the Democrats could then take and run with, see, deplorable, their followers are deplorable. So it became a political game. So I think you're kind of barking up a bad tree here. Now talk.
Fall into that trap. Certainly not Mike Pence, who's been around the block a few times. That was just, it's not even a trap because it was so blatant. It's come here, stick your head in this, in this cage with the lion.
Lisa, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, Sheila.
But this was 24 hours earlier. He would not put down David Duke.
He said, I don't want his support. I don't want his vote. He said that. He said that
later.
Exactly.
And that's not strong enough to say about David Duke. I'm sorry. That's not strong enough to say about David Duke.
Lisa,
you really think that's strong enough to say about David Duke, who is absolutely, cheerfully and openly anti-Semitic? Do you think that is strong enough to say, I don't want his support? Really?
I think David Duke is roughly the most irrelevant person in this country.
That's a very nice thing that you're saying, Lisa. I mean, really, that doesn't match a lot of things you say about, that sounds like a very mild thing for somebody who has very strong feelings.
Irrelevant. I just
you think he's irrelevant? That's really a nice thing to say about him.
I don't think that that's the answer that I would have given Lisa if I were you. I think that you have to let me, because here's where I wanted to go on this, and this is not to just, don't take this personally, okay? Because you know that we all love you. This has got to do with the way politics is being played in this cycle, and I think you have fallen prey to it, because I know you personally, and I know how thoughtful a human being you really are. What's happening here seems to be, it's such a win-lose at this point that even some bright, wonderful, smart conservatives have lost their way in this, in the respect that it's the win. It has no longer to do with what is right versus what is wrong, what is America versus what is Republican or versus Democrat.
Halli.
Yes.
Listen,
okay.
I'm just going to respond in comment.
Okay, that's fine.
Here's how I see it.
Okay.
It's always the win. It's the win from Hillary's side, too. Not what's right and what's wrong. It's the win. All she wants is to win, and that's undoubtedly appropriate. You don't get to be the party's nominee for president if you don't want to win more than pretty much anything else. Now, your idea of what is good for the country and my idea of what is good for the country are two separate things, because I see a lot of her policies as extraordinarily detrimental. I feel that I can tolerate things I don't like about the Republican candidate, just as you tolerate things you don't like about the Democrat candidate.
What do you like about him, Lisa?
Oh, I like that he's smashing the media hard in the face.
That's what we want in a president. That's what we want in a president. That's the most important thing in a president.
Yes, I think I agree with you on that one.
Presidential candidate.
It is very important to Republicans and conservatives that the Republican candidate not let himself be defined by the liberal media. That is 100% important. If Mitt Romney had been able to be president,
a presidential candidate, what about him as president would you like?
You know, if you want to have a substantive conversation about policy, that's fine.
It's not
that's
one thing.
Personally, I'm 100% in favor of his views on immigration. I think our country is out of control. There's no border. It has to be stopped for a while and digested, as we've done after every large immigration spurt in our nation's history.
It's interesting that you said that, though. Let me interrupt you here, because that's the one thing he's backed down on. The one thing that was really, in my opinion, something that I could have understood and did understand, and I kind of agree with, to the dismay maybe of some, but I'm on you on that side. We have to get this thing in check. He's backed off of that very thing. He doesn't ever, whatever he says on Monday, he may change his mind on Tuesday. Does that not concern you?
Well, here's what his speech, which is what we're going by, the most recent speech, said that was different. He said, yes, we will deport all criminals. We will deport all sorts of people. The one thing that's different, there will be extreme vetting, nobody coming in from war-torn countries in the Middle East. The one thing that he emphasized was that the last thing that happens is he sets up any deportation schedule for illegals who've lived here peacefully and never broken any laws. And that is something that, as a matter of reality, everybody understands kind of has to happen. Nobody wants to see a bunch of guards going out and, pulling people out of their homes. This is because, in fact,
but I'm all right. But I'm going to
the Nazi Association.
Well, no, that's for sure. I understand that. But the fact of the matter is, think of the rallies that he had when he had so many people at those rallies going, yeah, build the wall, ... So all that does is say to me that he doesn't stand for anything other than politics. And I don't agree with what you said earlier, that it is always about the win. I think that it's about the win. Whoa, let me finish. I think it's about the win on one side, and on the other side, I think it's about what is right. I may not like a lot of Hillary's policies. You know that I'm more of an independent than I am a Democrat or a Republican. But I will tell you that one thing that she's always stood for, and that is she's been in this game for a long time and fought her way through some pretty rotten things and stood by the things that she agrees with, whether you agree with it or I agree with it, Sheila or Susanna. It doesn't matter. He couldn't even go for 6 months without changing his tune on something. The guy stands for nothing other than what's going to get him into the White House so he can rename it the Trump House. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about that. I'm going to change the subject. I want to talk about Kellyanne Conway, because I think this woman is the most fascinating creature ever. I'm fascinated by the turnaround she's done on Trump's campaign, how brilliant she is as a political operative. I think she's weird as hell, personally. I mean, I've got a picture on my Facebook page. Anybody want to go look with she and her husband? That kind of like freaked me out. But she knows what she's doing. She knows it so well that she's rewritten Donald Trump in the image that she thinks he needs to be rewritten in order to win the election. Should not she be running for the presidency and not Mr. Trump? Because the minute that he goes off her script, he puts his little old foot in his big mouth. Susanna Andrews?
No, I don't think she should be running for the presidency. I think she's
humor, darling, humor.
Wait, I think she's doing the job she's been paid to do.
Right.
She's a good campaign manager, and she's good at dealing with, grown-up babies. So that doesn't make her necessarily a good candidate for the White House. We're all getting kind of loosey-goosey here. He has lowered our standards so much that whenever somebody marginally impressive crosses the political stage, people say, oh, wouldn't that be a good candidate for president? Gee, why doesn't Hillary resign? Why don't we make Huma Abedin candidate for president?
I was being facetious, my friend, but I'm sure you know that. Sheila, you got anything to say about that?
No,
Kellyanne Conway,
she did turn his campaign around.
She got him to apologize. I don't like her. I mean, I dislike Trump so much. I don't like anybody who's shilling for him. And there are certain conservative women commentators who, for example, my husband, who's a big news watcher, has always liked and now feels very negatively toward. One is Anna Holmes because she's sucking up to Trump. So I feel the same way about Kellyanne Conway. Did she improve it? I guess she did. She had him apologize. I'm scared that he's gaining the way he's gaining, and Hillary's losing ground the way she's losing, and this health thing has become a conspiracy theory thing. I'm really scared about all of this.
Yeah, but I do think it's fascinating what a great job that she's done. But you brought something up that I did want to. Well, go ahead.
One
Lisa.
Kellyanne and I have been good friends for 25 years. She was at my children's bat mitzvahs. I had dinner with her once a month for about 8 years in the early part of this century. I think Kellyanne. What's interesting about Kellyanne that none of you appear to know is that she started off working for Jack Kemp, who was pretty idealistic in a lot of ways, certainly about minorities, about what the Republican Party ought to do to help especially black communities. Mm-hmm. And the fact that was the first thing she seemed to bring in there, something that every Reaganite I know has wanted to see a candidate do for 30 years, go to an inner city, go to a black church, talk about the ways the Great Society and Democrat policies have destroyed all those cities and locked a bunch of people into welfare. The fact that she's doing that, I think, is beyond brilliant. But it's not brilliant in the sense like, where did she get this? This is what she is representing, a very real and solid strain of the Republican Party.
Actually, she is, but he's not, and she put her words in his mouth, and I think that's important to say, because as I wrote when he went to that black church last week, I thought to myself, why did he go there? He didn't go there to sell his wares. He went probably because he wanted to see what the hell the inside of a black church looked like, which I guarantee he'd never been in before last week. Look where we are. We're at 28:31. Oh my gosh! So we have to say adios to all. However, before we do, Susanna, you have anything special you want to add? Tell us about. I just want to share with all of you today, seeing as how I'm down here south of the Mason-Dixon line on the Chesapeake Bay, that July was the hottest month on the planet Earth in 136 years, and August has just tied it. And our water level has risen here, and if we hang on to this little cottage long enough, it's 2 little streets from the bay, we're going to have oceanfront property in about 5 years. Glad you brought that up. Sheila? Not that much. Thought we'd talk about Huma and Anthony, but didn't have time, so whatever. We'll get to the next time. We'll do it. Yeah, we'll get there. Sheila. About time. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and Miss Lisa Schifrin?
Well, not because I watch Dancing with the Stars, but my middle child loves it.
I do.
I want to tell you, Rick Perry, who is gorgeous, is not a great dancer. I watched him dance last night, and he was pretty awkward.
I call him the dancing fool. That's the last thing I had on my list of things to speak about today, Lisa. So, see, we have a lot in common. And he is so bow-legged he could never make a dancer. No way, Jose. But he was fun. He was adorable to watch because he has a wonderful personality, I have to say. So everybody watch Dancing with the Stars. That's it, guys. Fellow broads, Another week under the belt. Always
fun.
I love you all.
We hope we didn't gang up on you. We really like
everyone.
How about cheers, and click, click, and till next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. Associate producer, Suzanne Probst. Music by Tony Rosales Jazz. Visit HalliCasserJayne.com.